Configuring management group settings. Okay, so we've got our scom server installed, and all of those initial pieces and prerequisites that we needed to do in order to get it installed are all on our server. We have SQL installed and we're ready to go. And at this point, we are ready to really begin the configuration of our scom server in preparation for bringing clients in and bringing management packs in. Now, this is the first of a number of different nuggets that we're going to go through that are going to help you with the process of getting that environment set up. And what's interesting is we're not actually going to get to the point where we're going to really spend time looking at day-to-day scom operations for a couple of nuggets here. We first, in this nugget, we need to talk about the management group settings themselves, and then we're going to talk about, in the next nugget, talking about discovering resources, installing agents, and then the one after that is going to be dealing with the management packs themselves, and then after that, the alerting and notifications. And then only after we get some of those basic stuff installed and ready to go and configured and ready for operations are we really going to talk about the process of managing scom on a day-by-day basis. That's going to be number 8. So this is the first of a series of nuggets that's really going to get that environment ready to go and ready to be brought into operations. Now, in this nugget, we're going to talk about the console itself, and we're going to take kind of a first look at that console and the different nodes and elements that are there when you look at the console. I think you'll be interested to know the way the console is set up should make it relatively easy for you to manage your environment and to also manage those alerts as they come down. And once we understand the way that that console looks, then we want to kind of dig into the administration of Operations Manager itself and look at the configuration of our management groups. We're going to look at those settings and get those settings prepared so that when our clients come in and begin sending in data into our database and filtering it through our management packs, that it's going to be set up with the right settings from the get-go. At the same time, we're going to talk about some suggested settings here, which will help you understand what sorts of settings make sense for your environment. And then once we do that too, I want to take just a minute and also look at the web console. And while this sort of makes sense a little bit further down the road when we talk about day-to-day operations, you may deploy that web console to some of your the people in your environment, the administrators in your environment, if they don't have the full operations console, or if perhaps you're out in the field and don't have access to that full operations console. Now I'm going to start by actually minimizing this, and this is the server scom nugget that we've installed in the last nugget, and I've already brought up the Operations Manager console here. This is the console that you'll be using to do all of the management and monitoring of Operations Manager once it's up and in production. You'll see here that we have, first of all, down here in the lower left, we have 4 different nodes that really change what aspect of Operations Manager we're going to be looking at any particular point in time, and in this case we're looking at the monitoring node here. Now when I click on this monitoring node, as you'll see here, I have up here in the upper left-hand pane a tree of things that allow me to determine really what I want to look at in this monitoring pane. That when I choose here in the left pane what element I want to look at, over here in this, I will call this the middle pane. You'll find out in a second why. But in this middle pane here, it will show us more information about what we're interested in looking at. Now, I've clicked here on the computers node, and what that does is it gives me more or less a nice roll-up list of all the computers that are currently in my environment that I'm currently monitoring using scom's agents, or even through the agentless methods as well. You'll see here that this computer, scom nugget, actually is considered healthy because all of the roll-up reports that we'll discuss a little bit later, all those roll-up reports actually review it as healthy, and so we consider that server to be healthy as it is today. Now, if I go here and want to look at the individual alerts that may be coming up in my environment and what they mean, I click here on the Active Alerts node and actually take a look at some of the alerts that may be popping up. You'll see here I have a couple of sample alerts here related to performance modules that can't find performance counters, maybe an OLEDB results error, these sorts of things. Some of these alerts are going to be important to you. Some of these alerts are not going to be important to you. And as we go on and start talking about the day-to-day scom operations, we'll talk about what you're going to want to do with those alerts to either make them go away or to let it know that you're working on the alert, or essentially to let the Operations Manager server know what you want to do with each of the alerts that it pops up in your environment. Now remember, the job of Operations Manager is to go do all of the servers that you are interested in looking at in your environment, to look at their WMI status, to look at the values in WMI, to look at the event log, to look at performance. And when you're looking at that information on that machine and pulling it back to the server, it's going to filter that information through those management packs. When it filters that information through the management pack, it's going to take a large amount of data and reduce it down to what it believes is important for you to look at. So these aren't the only event log log errors that are currently on the system. There are a lot more there, but these are the ones that Operations Manager believes are interesting or are useful for you to be aware of. We have a couple of different notes here. Discovered inventory essentially just gives us a list again of all the servers that are in our inventory today. We don't actually have any distributed applications at this point except for the default one here, this Operations Manager Management Group. We'll talk about distributed applications a little bit later on. And then if we have any tasks that are actively running, we can actually see what the status of those tasks here are here in the task status node. Now you remember, I actually told you that this was the middle pane not too long ago, and the reason for that is by default, if you click under the View button here, this Actions pane is going to be available for you as well. Let me switch back here to the Computers node so we can take a look at a little bit more of the actions that are available based off of what we've selected here in the middle pane. Now the Actions menu is designed that whatever I've selected here in the middle pane, any actions that I can accomplish on that computer or element or node or what have you are going to be available here in the Actions menu. I'm actually going to spend most of the time with this Actions menu closed, and the only reason I'm doing that is because so I can provide more space so that we're not really constrained in the space that we're looking at. But this Actions menu is available by default, and it shows you what those actions are. And we click the button here to actually eliminate the Actions menu as necessary. So going down the monitoring node here just a little bit further, we have agentless exception monitoring, which we're going to turn on a little bit later. Same thing with auto collection services. If I go down to Microsoft Windows Client, once I start bringing clients in that have agents installed, then I can start viewing more detailed data about those clients. For example, logical disk state or network adapter state associated with them. Right now we don't have any agents out here, so we're not pulling any data back. We can even look at operation system performance data that's coming out of those agents as well. Once we get agents on those systems, this location, this area inside of the monitoring node is going to provide us some valuable information about how those computers are doing. So that's really the monitoring node, and again, we're going to spend a lot more time with that a little later on, but that's where you're going to be spending a lot of your time in the day-to-day operations of Operations Manager. The second node here is the authoring node. Now I told you that all that event log and WMI and performance data actually gets filtered through these management packs, and those management packs are what provides the rules, more or less, for determining whether or not the information that's coming in should be of interest to you. Now, you can imagine that in developing those management packs, that Microsoft or whoever developed the management pack had to make some assumptions about what is important and what isn't important. And you'll find that, well, maybe every so often you get an error message that you don't really care about, but it keeps popping up and you have to resolve it. Well, what this allows you to do here within the authoring node is not only create new management packs, but also tailor the existing configuration of existing management packs. And we'll have later on in this series, we'll have a whole nugget that's going to talk about the process of tuning those management packs to reduce your level of false positives that you receive inside of your monitoring node. So keep your eye on this space here, because that's where we're going to see a lot of this tailoring of those management packs a little later on. I'm going to skip over administration here for a second and go down to my workspace here, because it doesn't look very interesting right now. But when you have your workspace that you're going to be working with, you have the ability of creating views automatically that show you the information that you're really interested in looking at. And this is where that location is going to be for your custom workspace. The important part for us here today is this administration node. And under the administration node, we are provided a location where we can actually do the configuration of Operations Manager itself. Now you'll notice here that by default we have, fresh out of the box, we have some configurations that are required but are yet incomplete. You'll see here that we have configure computers and devices to manage, and also the process of importing in specific management packs. Now we're going to do those over the next couple of nuggets, but before we actually bring in that data, the first thing that we really want to do is get those settings correct. So we want to set up the environment properly so it's doing the right things with those data before we actually start bringing in that data. And that's what we're going to do here through the rest of this nugget. What I want to do first is actually kind of troll through a couple of these that are important for us to look at this point. I'm going to start here with the device management node. And as you'll see here, we currently have one management server that is more or less in our environment today. And if I double click that management server, I'm going to look and see that it is indeed scom nugget. I only have that one management server in my environment. As I go and begin installing agents or connecting computers up via agentless method, or even connecting into network devices, I'm going to populate these locations here with the names of the computers that are currently under management. You'll see here I can see the health state and also the fully qualified domain name and the domain and the name and the domain of each one. And those will get populated a little bit later. What I'm really interested in at this point is this settings node here. And under this settings node is actually where we go through the process of setting up the management group settings for the data to come in. You'll see here that we have a number of different things that we need to do in order to configure our operations management server, and we're going to step through each of these in turn so you can get an idea for what they are, what they do, and also what a good setting for them may be related to your environment. Remember, the number of machines that you may have in your environment may be smaller or greater, and the more machines you have in your environment, there may be some differences in how you want to set these settings for your operations management server. Now, the agents this global agent settings here, this is related to the heartbeat. And what this is the agents that you've installed out in your network at specific intervals are going to talk back to your operations management server to let the operations manager server know that it is functioning correctly. Now, that interval here is set by default to 60 seconds. That means that every 60 seconds, a client's going to send a little packet out to the operations management server and say, yep, I'm still functioning. And as you'll find out a little later on, if the operations management server recognizes that it's missed some of these heartbeat intervals, then it begins to understand that there may be something wrong with that agent or with the client that agent is installed to. So you may want to increase or decrease this number based on what your tolerance is for the amount of downtime that can occur on a server before you actually recognize that server may be down. You're actually going to merge this number with the number we'll talk about here in just a second to let the operations manager server know when it needs to alert you that an outage event has occurred. If your tolerance for outage is extremely small, then you may want to reduce this heartbeat interval. But you got to be careful about reducing the heartbeat interval, because the more that you decrease it, the more chances that you might end up with a false positive because of conditions on the network that prevent that heartbeat from occurring properly. So we're going to set that just at 60 seconds, which is the default for now. That's the default heartbeat across the entire operations manager server. The next option we have down here is under general, and this relates to alerts. These can relate to auto resolution or alert resolution states and also any auto resolve alerts. And I don't want to spend a lot of time here talking about these because we have a whole nugget that's going to talk about alerts and setting up alerts and what those have to do with also notifications as well. But you can see here what this allows us to do is create additional resolution states for any alerts that we may have in our environment. Now, think about your service desk application. Think about your help desk application. You may have various states in your help desk application for what the tickets are in your environment today. Open, closed, pending, in work, waiting for the vendor, known problem, those sorts of states. This is a location where you can actually create additional resolution states that you would then apply to known issues that are brought up or known alerts that are brought up in the operations manager environment. And this allows you to customize those here from that location. And also here under auto resolve alerts, what this allows us to do is determine the amount of time when we recognize an alert that we just haven't gotten around to is really no longer relevant to us anymore. Right? What this says is I want to automatically resolve alerts after a certain amount of time. So I have a couple of options here. The first one says resolve all active alerts in the new resolution state if they haven't been touched in 30 days. So if an alert appears, if an alert comes up and it's still in new, it hasn't been touched, it hasn't been looked at, nobody's really cared about it, over a period of 30 days, we'll just consider that is an uninteresting ticket at this point and automatically resolve that. If an active alert is healthy, if the alert source is considered healthy, that means that the health state, and we'll talk a little bit about health state a little later, but the health state of that server is healthy for a period of 7 days, then we'll just assume that all of the active alerts are okay and we can resolve all those active alerts. Again, depending on what the policies of your organization are, will depend on what you want to change those dates to. I click OK. And we go down here to the database grooming element here. Now you remember, we're going to be pulling in lots and lots and lots of data. I mean, the event log on one server can be huge, let alone 10 or 100 or 1,000 servers that you may be connecting to. And so our operations manager database we may not be interested in that data after a certain period of time. And so what we want to do is we want to actually call that information out of the database, perhaps move it to a warehouse database later on if necessary, but at least get it out of our primary database after a certain period of days. Now, resolved alerts, for example, if they're older than 7 days, go ahead and clear them out of the database. It may be event data, for example, 7 days, performance data, task history, monitoring job data. All of these, this screen allows me to change the amount of time that I want to keep that information in my primary operations manager database. database before sending it out to elsewhere, or even deleting it out of the database. If I choose, for example, Resolved Alerts and choose the Edit button here, you'll see that I'm allowed to change the number of days that is associated with them. By default, all of these are 7 days except for performance signature data, because that's a lot of data, and that's actually set to 2 days at this point. Now, if you want to have more data in your database and you have the capacity for that larger database, you may want to increase this amount. I wouldn't necessarily suggest reducing it by too much, but you may want to increase the amount of time that you want to keep alerts around, maybe for historical purposes or for tracking purposes before they get deleted or moved off into other locations. So that's the database grooming sections here. Under notification too, we have the ability to set up some notification elements as well based off of the results of some alerts. Perhaps when an alert comes in, we want to set up some sort of notifications. We have a whole nugget again talking about notification based on email and instant messaging and SMS and command type notifications. So we're going to skip over this at this point, but be aware that depending on what sorts of alerts you may get, you can choose to have them go to different people through different notification channels inside of Operations Manager. Under the privacy settings relate a lot to the privacy of the data in your environment. And this relates to things like the Customer Experience Improvement Program and also operational data reports, and then sending up error reports to Microsoft, those sorts of things. What this allows you to do is configure at a global scale whether or not you want your clients to join the Customer Experience Improvement Program, whether you want to send operational data reports to Microsoft, whether you want to send those error reports off to Microsoft, and then how you want to do it. And so really, again, this is going to be based off of the security policy of your organization. Do you, number one, care for Microsoft to get this data? Do you want them to have this data? Number two, are you afraid that giving them this data may be wrong for your organization? Maybe the security policy of your organization doesn't want you sending this stuff to Microsoft. And so this is really going to be an architectural decision on your part as to whether or not you want to send this sort of data up to Microsoft. Again, Microsoft puts this data or collects this data so it allows them to understand how people are using their products. But some people don't like to give it to them. Under operational data reports, same thing. This is set by default to no. One thing about error reporting here is we have the option of automatically sending error reports about this product without prompting the user. Now, this is different from CEIP and the operational data reports because this has to do with those specific error reports like Dr. Watson's and blue screens, those important ones, because the error reports, when you send that information to Microsoft, you're actually sending it and hoping to get a bit of a response back from them, hoping that you can go then and find out what that error actually means on those computers that the error actually occurs. And Microsoft can do that as part of this sending error reports to them. Now, the transmission of those errors to Microsoft, you have a couple of options for how you want to do that. First of all, you can filter the types of errors that are sent to Microsoft, maybe from specific users or computers or applications or modules. What this allows you to do is select which type of computers or which type of applications may actually be okay to send the errors off to Microsoft. And it allows you to tailor down what sorts of data you're actually sending to Microsoft. In addition, you can actually select what type of information is sent to Microsoft when the error occurs. You can upload the diagnostic data, any additional files and registry information, WMI queries, and dumps. This would be your memory dumps. And also the maximum number of CAB files to send to Microsoft per error group. More CAB files are going to be related to different types of errors. There's really not a great way of explaining the relation of the number of CAB files. Really, your reason for setting a maximum here would be based off of the bandwidth that you would have between you and Microsoft. You have an option here too to display links to those solutions as well, and also any surveys if you're interested in that. Really, when you send error information, when a client sends error information off to Microsoft, it goes off to the Microsoft online error checking database, the warehouse database where they include all that information, and they compile all of those errors, and then they get an understanding over time what those errors mean, and you can actually go back to Microsoft and find out, based off of what the error codes that you're seeing off of the error that you've received, what a potential solution to that may be. Now, more often than not, it actually says we don't really know, but at least it's a great location. If you see a blue screen or if you see a Dr. Watson, maybe Microsoft has a good solution for you that may help you out. You can also have a default solution link here when no Microsoft solution is available. This may be an internal site where you would put a standard form up that would say that there is no solution available in this case. So those are the error settings here associated with the privacy settings of our management group. The next item here is reporting. And under reporting, we have an option of choosing whether or not we want to send information off to our reporting server. Now, right now, we don't actually have a reporting server set up at this point. We're going to do that in a later nugget. But when we have that, we'll actually have to punch in the reporting server URL for creating that connection more or less to the reporting server itself. Same thing with web addresses here. I told you that with Operations Manager, we have the option of creating web consoles or pointing people to web consoles for the purposes of actually working with the alerts that are out there and viewing alerts and also even viewing some online product knowledge as well. Now, this is the default location, this scom nugget :51908/default.aspx. That is that web console. And if you hit this test button, it'll actually bring up a little web page here that looks very similar to this. That is more or less the console for the Operations Manager. Now, what's great about this console is it doesn't include things like the administration node. It doesn't include things like the authoring node. All it has is the monitoring information that you may want to pass out perhaps to your help desk or perhaps to your administrators out in the field that aren't Operations Manager administrators, maybe your technicians out in the field so they can keep abreast of what's going on in your environment. This way, by giving them this website, you don't actually have to give them a full console. And then the website has its pros and its cons. It may be a little slower than the console, but at least you don't have to go to deploy it. The other big benefit here is that if you're away from your desk, if you're in the data center somewhere, then you can actually bring up this console and view the status of your environment without actually having to go back to your desk to go and open up a console again. So you can change this location if you want to, but this is the default location here for the web address associated with that console. Now, before we talked about the heartbeat associated with the agents. That's the heartbeat that's coming from the agents to the server. But we also want to configure when on the server side how many missed heartbeats are going to be allowed before we consider that computer to maybe having a problem. I told you that the combination of the number of seconds between each heartbeat times the number of missed heartbeats is really going to be your indication for whether that server is down. Now, we had 60 seconds between heartbeats, and we're allowing for 3 missed heartbeats before we ping the computer to see if maybe there's a problem. Now, what's that going to be? That's going to be 60 seconds for the first, 60 seconds for the second, 60 seconds for the third, and then if we miss the fourth one, then we're actually going to note that there's a problem. Well, that's 2 minutes and 240 seconds at that point, right? So, or 4 minutes. Now, if your environment is okay with going 4 minutes, a potential 4 minutes actually going by before you consider a server to be down, well then leave that setting the same. But I know a lot of environments actually want to know if a server is down in more than 4 minutes. So you may want to either adjust the number of missed heartbeats or the interval between heartbeats to dial that down just a little bit. But that's completely up to you if you want to do that at this point. The last one down here is security, and we have a whole nugget again talking about security, but this really relates to one specific element of security, and that has to do with agent installations in the environment. And interesting enough, scom, as compared to Configuration Manager, is very, very, very cognizant about how agents are actually installed to candidate computers. With Configuration Manager, really, agents are everywhere, and you don't really care about the agents because you want them to be installed everywhere. But with Operations Manager, if you have a rogue agent that, for example, gets installed to a server that keeps going up and down and up and down and up and down, then that may impact your metrics that you have to report up to your management. So you may not want to have rogue agents installed around your network. You want to very judiciously install those agents to the computers, specifically from the scom console. Now, what this security setting allows you to do is effectively reject the connection of any manually installed agents into your Operations Manager console, or perhaps review them once they are installed and allow them to be brought in after you've reviewed them and accept them. Now, if you choose to reject manual agent installations, that means that you will not be able to do any sort of manual agent installation whatsoever. If you choose the bottom one here, any manual agent installation will go into that pending management view, which we looked at, which is over here. Once you install that manual agent, it's going to show up in here. You'll have to hit the approve button to approve that agent, and it'll then become a part of your Operations Manager infrastructure. The last one here is we can check this checkbox for automatically approving any new manually installed agents. Now, Microsoft doesn't recommend you select this. Then they don't recommend you select it because any manually installed agent will automatically become a part of your Operations Manager infrastructure. So again, just like before, this is going to be an architectural decision on your part for how you want to handle those manually installed agents. In our case, I'm going to choose to allow to put them in pending management, so at least I'm not rejecting them. At least I have the option of reviewing them if they are installed manually inside of my environment. And so those really are the management group settings. Those are the master settings for my server and for my operations manager infrastructure at this point. So what have we talked about? We took a look at the console, and we took a look even at the web console down here at the bottom, so you can take a look at it. And again, we just took a real quick first look at it. We'll talk about more about it when we talk about those day-to-day scom operations. We took a look at the nodes and elements, and we also went through the administration of our management group so that we could take a look at it and suggest the settings that are important for us based off of the size of our environment, and also really what we want to do, what the rules are for our environment as well. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.